Welcome to Zen Footsteps. My podcast is designed to invite you to explore new perspectives and challenge the way you see the world. Through engaging conversations with thought-provoking guests, we're going to delve into the idea that you can transform your thinking and inspire personal growth. From redefining success to uncovering unconventional paths to fulfillment, each episode is a step towards expanding your mind and embracing the journey of discovery. So join us as we walk alongside innovators, thinkers, and change makers who can help you see life in a whole new light. Hello and welcome to another episode of Zen Footsteps. And today's guest is Paula Pearce. She's a mum, a foster carer, and a proud Fibro Warrior. Now, after years of pain and frustration with the healthcare system, Paula took her healing into her own hands. So now she's here today on Zen Footsteps, I'm pleased to say, to share how she turned her life around and found hope, strength, and purpose in the face of fibromyalgia. Paula, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
It's great to have you here. I'm going to go straight into it. I've got so many questions I want to ask you. Take us back to when your first symptoms began and those early signs. What was that like?
Yeah, so for me, my fibromyalgia actually started in my hands and my feet. I had these really sharp shooting pains on and off, and I couldn't work out why. That took me to the doctors in the very first place, and then it moved, and I had pain in my jaw and pain in my ribs. And those were my very first early symptoms. And I was back and forward to the doctors for probably about 2 years. And then she finally referred me to the rheumatologist where I was diagnosed.
And had you come across the term fibromyalgia before?
Never heard of
it.
it.
It was?
No, never heard of it. So my doctor hadn't even mentioned it. So she thought chronic fatigue. It was the rheumatologist that mentioned fibro, but I'd never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. He didn't send me away with an awful lot of information, if I'm honest, just with a plan to take back to the doctors of what medications I could have. And that was amitriptyline and some painkillers. There was not an awful lot more that he gave me in that moment other than the diagnosis of fibro and chronic fatigue. So that was what he'd told me in 2017.
And when you went through the diagnosis, I mean, a lot of people with fibromyalgia, they go through a diagnosis and there's sort of pressure points and 18 points and things like that. Is that pretty much what they did with you?
Yeah, so he took some blood tests and he read the results. I thought, because I didn't know anything about it, that he was going to go, oh, I can see this, this, and this, and it means X, Y, and Z. But now what I know, that he was actually looking for there to not be anything, and then that would meet the criteria for fibro. So he did the blood tests and read the results. He did the 18-point pressure point test. And that, along with the conversation about my symptoms, was how he diagnosed.
And how did you feel from that? Because one of the big things I find with anything, it's a bit like when I had cancer. Knowing is sometimes better than not knowing, because at least you know and you go, okay, now what do I do? But fibro is a little bit different, isn't it? Because we don't really understand it completely.
Well, I didn't really understand that at that time. So for me, I'd got a diagnosis and that was great. And we'd got a plan and this was going to get better. And I didn't really understand that the medication wasn't going to be the answer. I just thought, well, now the doctors and the consultant have told me this is what it is. That's great. I've always been the kind of person that I want to have a plan. I want to know what it is that's going to be the next bit and how do we do it. And then we just go away and we do it. And then that's fine. Little did I realize that actually it was opening Pandora's box, really. That was a diagnosis, but it was a diagnosis that left me with more questions than answers.
And were you getting sort of flare-ups at the time? Were you getting the sort of fatigue and everything that went with it post this?
So not so much in the early days. And I know that the doctors will say fibromyalgia isn't progressive because it doesn't progress in terms of tissue damage and that kind of damage internally in your body. But in terms of my symptomology, is that the right word?
Yep, that's the one.
I was getting worse and worse and worse as the years went on. So at that time, I didn't have huge amounts of brain fog. I didn't have huge amounts of fatigue, although I was tired because I was in pain all the time. It wasn't as bad as it got. It got really bad.
And how did that start to affect life? Because you've got kids, you're married, all this sort of stuff. How did that impact on you on a daily basis?
Well, I could do less, and then my husband needed to do more. And that really wasn't where I was comfortable sitting. Does that make sense? I was always very proactive in my work. We had our own business at the time. I wanted to be super mum. I wanted to be super boss. I wanted to just be successful at everything I did. And I know more about the implications of having that kind of profile of a personality now. And that's probably created some of this stress in my body and led me to fibromyalgia. But it was very much like somebody chopped my arm off. I felt like I wanted to be this person and I was trapped in this body and this brain that did not work. And it led me to the point where actually my husband had to do everything, because there would be times that I couldn't even get out of bed for weeks at a time. And he would spend hours and hours and hours on the internet researching stuff that he could do, because he would have paid anything, he would have taken me anywhere, because it wasn't just affecting my life, it was affecting everybody's life around me. And my capacity to consider things outside of my own health got less and less and less. It became consuming to me, which is just really sad. It's really sad, because I know that this is how everybody with fibromyalgia is feeling. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know so many people had fibro. I thought I was the only person in the entire world that understood these symptoms. But the more I talk to this community, the more I realize that people are really struggling.
And was there a turning point for you? Because a lot of people define themselves by, for example, an illness or a disease. What was the turning point for you where you suddenly went, I cannot be defined by this? What do I do? What changed?
So I got to the point in my fibro journey where my symptoms were so bad that I couldn't walk. I had a walking stick even in the house. I had a mobility scooter. I couldn't get out of bed for weeks at a time because the fatigue was so bad, and my brain fog was horrific. So some days I couldn't even have a conversation because I couldn't find the right words. I would struggle with social interactions because I couldn't understand how people's tones were or how I was coming across, because my brain function just didn't work. And I phoned the doctors desperate, and I'd had so many medications. I'd had amitriptyline, I'd had all the painkillers, codeine, tramadol, morphine. I was taking morphine every day at the end, pregabalin, duloxetine, nothing was working. And I phoned my doctor, and we'd not long moved house. And when I moved house, I had to move doctor's surgeries. So I called my new doctor and I said, listen, I'm desperate. I have got no quality of life. I'm about to turn 40 and I just feel like I'm going to be stuck in this bed for the next 40 years with just no quality. Like, how do I do this? How do I get better? I need some help. I'd been to the pain management clinic, and she just looked through my file and she said, there's nothing else we can do. She went, if you want, I will add some paracetamol to your repeat prescription. And I just thought, you must be taking the mick. Like, honestly, this can't be the end. It can't be the end of my journey. Fibro cannot win. And I was really, really upset. I felt like I'd been abandoned. I felt like I'd been left on my own. And I went to bed that night and I woke up the next day. And I don't know what it was. Honestly, I don't know what it was. But I just thought, if you're not going to help me, then F you.
Yeah.
And I have to find a way of doing this myself, because in that moment, I felt like it was me choosing whether I lived or I just died. Because I know it sounds dramatic for people that don't have fibro, but I was at my lowest of my low. I didn't see a way forward, and I didn't have the capacity to be thinking about doing this for the next 40 years. It'd been 5 years, and that was already enough. And I just decided I wasn't going to give up on me. And I just became obsessed with research. Every time I was well enough, I was listening to podcasts. I was watching clips on the internet. I just became obsessed with longevity and what could I do to get my body working better. I hadn't even opened the Pandora's box about emotional well-being and trauma and all the rest of it at that point. But I spent a month researching, and I just thought, well, let's do it. Like, I'd convinced my brain, we're going to get better. And I started making changes. I started making changes initially as to what I was putting in my body. And I saw differences in my pain and my brain fog within 2 to 3 weeks. And because I'd already told myself I was getting better, and then I could feel myself getting better, it was that trajectory then, and I was off. And I wanted to do everything that was possible, every single therapy, every single kind of the weirder the more wonderful it seemed to me. And everything that I had turned my nose up at, the meditation, the breath work, the grounding, I just wanted to do everything because I could feel it was making a difference in my body. And I was just so excited. And honestly, within 3 months, I could have said to you, I don't have fibro anymore. And I know that I will always have fibro. And this is about how I manage my fibromyalgia symptoms every day. But that's how fast it happened for me.
I think so. I think it's like if you ask an alcoholic, are they an alcoholic? They say they're always an alcoholic. I just don't drink. And I think it's the same with fibro. And you've touched on a really interesting point there. Well, 2 points I want to talk about, which is one, I've yet to come across a case of fibromyalgia that there's not trauma. That's the first thing. And the way that women process trauma does seem to be different to men. And the majority of people that have fibromyalgia, as you know, are women.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is what you put in your mouth is as relevant as what you put into your brain.
Yeah.
And we're living in a ultra processed food nation. And it's astounding with me. When I get patients coming in and I look at their nutrition, I always am astounded that they'll say to me things like, I'll say, for example, eat organic food. And I can pretty much, if I said, right, I'm psychic, I'm going to write an envelope, what you're going to say, and they'll go, it's too expensive. Mm-hmm. That's what they always say. It's almost like a stock answer. And yet when you make some basic nutritional changes, like you've said, so what did you do in terms of nutrition? What was the change you made?
So I was vegan for 5 years because I thought that was going to help my body. I was convinced that if I didn't have so many animal proteins, then my body didn't have to work as hard as it was working, which I think is probably not an irrational concept. But I realized how many chemicals I was eating because the food that I was eating was so highly processed. And that was really the turning point for me. I changed from eating anything that was pre-made to single ingredient foods, which then also included animal proteins. I went back to eating meat. But it was, my plate probably looked a bit weird because it would be a piece of meat. It would be a bit of cheese, a few veggies. It might be some sauerkraut. It might be a bit of white rice. It was just individual things that I could make. But I had made a list of what I wanted to eat because I didn't have great brain capacity at that point. So I thought, well, if I make a list, I can just stick to that and I can choose which ones of those things I want off that list every day. And I just stuck to it and I cut out all of the processed foods. And it wasn't just a case of cutting out the ultra processed foods. I cut out the processed foods as well, because there is a difference between the two. And I just went back to single ingredient foods. And although I didn't have loads of energy, making some scrambled eggs and cooking it in a bit of butter, I worked out was way better for me because it would make me feel better than it would put something in the microwave that was pre-packaged, because actually it took kind of about the same amount of my energy to do that. And I just made these really small changes. I didn't spend hours in the kitchen because I wasn't well enough to do that. But in my own time, I'd made this list. And like I say, I did about a month's worth of research before I changed anything. And I just didn't deviate away from it because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And I just wanted to try and take ownership. And I felt like my fibromyalgia was out of control. But the thing I had control over was what I put in my mouth. And that was the changing point for me, because I felt like I had some control back at a time when I felt massively out of control. So I cut out all the processed foods. I cut out all the inflammatory oils, vegetable oil, sunflower oil, rapeseed oil. I went back to using animal fats, butter, lard, avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil. As long as I wasn't cooking it, I was using that. And just introducing some healthy fats as well, because I was born in the 80s. I've grown up in this low fat revolution, and it's wild, isn't it? Because actually it's doing us no good. Everybody's hormones are impacted. Everybody's gut health is impacted. And we just don't know these things because big food and big pharma are creating this rhetoric of what we're supposed to eat every day. And we're doing our best to follow these guidelines when actually the guidelines are not doing our bodies any favors. So yeah, that's where I started. And I started to build in some intermittent fasting. I didn't rush it. I just kind of moved my breakfast back by half an hour a day. And then I stopped eating half an hour earlier than I would have done. And I just gradually reduced the amount of time in a day where I was eating. But when I was eating, it was whole, nutritious food that was bioavailable for my body to use. And yeah, that's where it all started for me.
Because there's a real disconnect I find with food now, in relation to the way that we're brought up and we're taught about food. I grew up with understanding that food was as important as thoughts and what you put in your body and things like that. But I see now with kids, they don't. I've dropped my wife off at the station, for example, this morning as she's going up to London, and I saw a guy literally just downing an energy drink, and I thought, do you understand what that's doing to you? And then on top of that, the caffeine, and on top of that, all the processed foods. And if you're going to be kind of purist about it, I suppose you could say that, if you pick up something that says ingredient on it, it's not food. From that point of view. So when you went from that and you started to make changes, did the medical profession support you in any way? Or what would you like to say to the medical profession, knowing what you know now?
Well, my doctor doesn't know about my journey because I phoned her really desperate 20 months ago and she hasn't picked up the phone to check on me in the entire time. Now, you have to remember, I was the woman that couldn't walk, I couldn't work, I could barely get out of bed. I had a repeat prescription for 400 tramadol tablets and morphine and duloxetine every single month. And I have never, since I spoke to her, refilled my prescription. And yet she hasn't picked up the phone to check that I'm okay. It doesn't make sense to me. I know the GPs are massively overwhelmed, but they also surely have a duty of care to their patients. And if I broke my arm, I would really want to go and see the doctors to try and help it. But when it comes to my well-being and my holistic health, I'd rather just focus on what I can do for myself, because I also think that along the way, not only have we lost the ability to understand the impact our food's having on us, I think we've also lost the ability to really understand how to look after ourselves. And when we get a little bit sick, we go to the doctors and we expect they're going to give us a pill or a potion or a medication, when actually there are so many things that we can be doing first. Have we improved our gut health? Have we made sure that we're not putting a load of inflammatory stuff in our bodies? Are we resting? Are we mindful? Are we present? Are we working through things that are difficult for our emotional well-being? And if all of those things aren't working, then go to the doctors. But I don't think that we do that. And I think that that's what we've lost. And I think we've lost the accountability for actually saying, well, how are you looking after yourself? And I think that's where the change is. And I think that's where the shift is. And I think that's where the shift needs to be moving forward for us to see long-term change in people's health and well-being, because it is deteriorating. If you look at people in the UK, you look at people in America, we are supposed to have two of the best healthcare systems in the world, yet people are getting sick, and they're getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And we have to break the cycle. We're the only people that can, because big pharma and big food are going to keep pushing, making money for themselves. I get it. They are businesses, but we have to decide whether or not we want to be part of that.
I think so. And I think that also, the best doctor is yourself.
Yeah.
Interesting, when I was in Gambia doing some medical aid, what I noticed in Gambia was very fit people, very strong people.
Yeah.
There was a thing recently, for example, I saw some as a podiatrist talking about feet, going through all these trainers and saying these trainers were the worst and these were the best. Now, there's one particular trainer he said was the worst, which is barefoot, which I actually wear, and I totally disagree. So for me, we were designed to walk barefoot.
Yeah.
So why would putting on trainers with an artificial arch squeezes your toes be good for you? I really don't understand it. And also when it comes to things like we're sitting all the time at work, we're not exercising, we're not getting up and about. And I think that I did a podcast, which is coming up soon, and we're talking about how suddenly the medical profession got to have our health. in control of our health.
Yeah.
Actually, we're in control of our health.
Yeah.
That's what's really important. And I don't understand where we just gave away our health, because you're right about big pharma. I do believe that why would a company making millions and millions ultimately want you to get well? Because getting well means, guess what? You don't need their product.
Yeah.
Now, that's fine when it comes to things like a washing machine or something like this, but this is human health. So I sometimes put my head above the parapet with this. I'm not saying that pharmaceuticals aren't good for you. I think pharmaceuticals have their place. If I break my arm, I'm going to the doctor. If I need surgery, I'm going to the
Agreed.
doctor.
Yeah.
And the medical profession are amazing people. They're people that became medics because they believed in caring. But somewhere along the line, like any political party that you join, you have to toe the line. And if you step outside of that line, your whole way of thinking or clarity is going to be attacked. And interestingly, I wanted to kind of ask your opinion on this, which is when Lana came on here and we talked about fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
One of the things that happened with her was the amount of people saying, "Oh, you couldn't have had fibromyalgia," and it's like, well, here's somebody like yourself really trying hard, and all of a sudden they're saying you couldn't have fibromyalgia. If there's some sort of club you have to be in and you have to be in pain, tell me what's your opinion because I don't have fibro. I want to know your opinion on this because it really angsts me.
Yeah. I think there is a whole swathe of the fibro community that are really downtrodden and are really uninspired and are feeling massively hopeless. And I think I also have people that will say, you must have been misdiagnosed. And I understand why they're saying these things. And the reason why they're saying these things is because their nervous system is highly stimulated at the moment and their brain is locked in to this fight or flight, and nothing seems possible that could possibly ever change where you're at. And I get it because I was there for so long. I didn't think anything was going to help. I went to the pain management clinic and I thought, we must be taking the mick because you want me to talk about my pain like that's going to solve it. How on earth is that going to help? But the problem is because the doctors are not educating these people about what fibromyalgia actually is, they're stuck in these heightened stress chemicals in their body and their brains are really anxious. So when you've got a highly overwhelmed, anxious brain, the possibility of change is massively scary to your brain. And I understand that because that's just the chemicals in your body at the moment. So I'm not here to judge those people. I just hope that if we can keep educating them to say that there is possibilities for change and actually creating something that makes your brain less worried is going to see huge amounts of healing potential moving forward, then we can start to change the rhetoric because the doctors aren't showing up for us. This information about sympathetic nervous system regulation is not new. I found a peer-reviewed medical article from 2011 the other day. It's all out there. The research is being done. But the truth is there isn't money in nervous system regulation, because if there was, they would make a pill and we would all go away and we would take it and we would be on it forever. And that would suit Big Pharma because that would be a solution for them to make money. But there isn't that. And because there isn't that, and the doctors want you to fit in this box and you tick their diagnosis criteria and then they prescribe something for that, because that's the process of doctoring at the moment. This is so complex. There's so many variable factors in what's caused people's fibro and then what's going to help heal people's fibro. I don't think there is necessarily a cure. I don't think that you're going to just never have to think about fibro again. But I think if you can become the expert in knowing how to look after your body, both physically and emotionally, you have the ability to manage your symptoms so that they're so low they don't affect your day-to-day life. So I understand why people feel like this. I also used to feel like this too. I just hope if we can all keep sharing this message that healing is possible, then that's going to bring so much light to so many people.
I totally agree. And the one thing I would want every fibro patient to understand is the difference between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah. Because when people come to me with issues, the first thing I do is down-regulate that. Mm-hmm. So I take them from a fight or flight into a relaxed state.
Yeah.
You can do meditation, hypnosis, yoga, all of those things all play into that. Even your vagus nerve, which is just close to the surface of what's called the mastoid bone on the side of your head here. In the human body, that's as close to the surface the vagus nerve is. And you can just rub that as well. Yeah. That down regulates. There's so many things you can do, but a lot of people, you've got to take the first step in the journey. Yeah. It's getting them to take that first step.
But it's scary. And I understand that, because when you have had a highly overwhelmed brain for a very long time, it's no different to if you were talking to somebody who was suffering from depression for a really long time. Change is really scary. And when you are so overwhelmed, sometimes it's easier to stay in the very difficult known than it is to take that step into a possibly better unknown. And I understand. I do massively get it. I just want to keep reassuring people that there are so many things that we have the power to control. And when it comes to our fibro, it's not easy. It's not instant, but it's worth it. It's worth showing up for yourself in a better way. And you might try something and it doesn't work. And that's okay, because then you try something else. But a lot of people give up at the first hurdle, don't they? And I think that we have to find our self-worth. We have to start doing these things for ourselves, because we're the only people that can. We're the only people that can make these decisions, and we can sit here with all the great tools and we can help these people, and we can say, if you try this, this is going to help. If you try this, this is going to help. But if you don't really, really want to do this, or you don't really, really want to show up for yourself, or you don't really, really want to, or you really don't think you deserve to feel better, then it won't work, because your brain will be stuck in that place where it's just releasing stress chemical after stress chemical after stress chemical.
That's the key. It is the stress chemicals for me. I mean, I'm sure you come across the spoon method, this method where we have a certain amount of energy units. That's the first thing to help regulate that. I mean, I've been talking for a while now, possibly, I should get you involved, Lana involved, and my wife involved. My wife, she's a senior paramedic. She's a lecturer at a university hospital, but she was also a health coach. And I sent her a fibromyalgia patient who literally could not walk up the stairs. She would go hands and knees.
Yeah.
And just after doing various leaky gut tests with her, because that's very important, and blood tests, she can now walk up the stairs. These are things that should be sort of standard. And what I would love to do is maybe do a conference. Maybe we do, hire someplace, all get together, invite the fibromyalgia community. But there is a thing here. Now, I'd like you to know your opinion on this. If you did something like that, the thing for me is you do have to charge people.
Yeah.
And part of that, I think, is that if we get something for free, we don't value it.
Agreed.
And I think we have to charge people.
Agreed. People, so I've created an online course for people to be able to go and access and to follow the things that I've done in my healing journey, so that they can start looking at whether or not they can implement these tools into their own lives and whether or not that might help them. And I will often get people say to me, if you know how to make these changes, why can't you give this information for free? And my answer is always the same. The research is out there and it's available and it's free. You just have to sift through quite a lot of stuff. So I've put it into one easy to access tool. But if you don't find any value in the information that I'm giving you, you're not going to want to access it long term. And I think that's kind of what you're saying as well, isn't it? Because you've got to be invested in this, and you've got to, when I say invested, I don't necessarily mean money. I mean, you've got to put a value on this information that you're getting, because there is so much information out there. What is the bit of information that I'm going to give you that's going to make you change? Because you will have had access to all this information throughout the media and social media, and it's all there and it's all available. But what's the bit that's going to actually sink in with you? what is this long-term change that's going to happen for you? Because without you really valuing that and you holding that information on a pedestal almost, and you saying, this is the one bit of information that's going to really, really change my life and I'm going to prioritize it, you've got to find some value in what that information means to you. I don't know if I've explained that the right way, but
no, I totally agree. I did some research into fibromyalgia. I've been doing this for 30 years now in healthcare, and so all that information I've worked hard. I've paid thousands and thousands for my training and my courses and everything, and I did the research into nutrition and fibromyalgia, especially in relation to mineral deficiencies. And what I found, without exception, in fibromyalgia, there was one particular mineral that everybody was deficient in, like it was spiking off the charts. Now, I did that research, and people, if I just said to me, "Oh, just give me that information," but would you do anything about it? It comes too easy. You've got to kind of want it. Now, even my I made it really easy. It's an ebook. It's not expensive. You know, I think it's like under 10 quid. You know what I mean? But you've got to at least want it. And I will help someone if they help themselves. And I think that takes us back to the medical model, which is, hey, doc, I've got a problem. Here's a pill. Go away.
Yeah.
But did the doctor say to you, hey, you know that processed food you're eating? Hey, you know that bus stop, you could get off one bus stop and walk? You don't do that.
Yeah.
And I think that I love what you're saying. And I want to drive people towards people like you, to buy their information, because it shows you've lived it, right? At the end of the day, I can do as many podcasts on fibromyalgia till the cows come home. I can empathize. I can try to understand from my sister's point of view who has it. But ultimately, I will never know what it is to have fibromyalgia. Like when I had cancer, all of a sudden I could say to a patient that came in who had cancer, I hope you don't mind me saying, but I had cancer. And they're shocked. But that empathy that creates and that understanding, is that your experience too?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I completely understand when everybody is saying what they're saying, because everybody that comes to me and we talk about how they're feeling, they're on a different part of their journey. But I feel like my fibromyalgia symptoms weren't that bad at the beginning, and at the end, they were really bad. And along that path, I can understand where everybody is. And it makes such a massive difference, because my husband was incredibly supportive in my journey. And I think he probably understood about fibro more than anybody else around me, but he didn't have it. And you can only have the capacity to be empathetic to a certain degree when you don't actually walk that walk for yourself, because it's not like any other illness I could ever really think to compare it to, because it's so engulfing and it's endless. Because fibromyalgia doesn't affect our life expectancy. We just are expected to live in this pain and fatigue and brain fog forever. And that's a really dark tunnel for a really long time. Does that make sense?
It does. And why is it, again, coming back to you on this, why is it, do you think, that women are getting this?
So I think that this is my opinion, and I'm sure that not everybody's going to agree, but I think that we as women worked really hard, didn't we, to have the ability to choose how our lives were. We fought really hard for the vote. We fought really hard to work full time. We fought really hard to have the decision whether or not we wanted to be a mum. And yet now we seem to have a less defined role, and yet we are showing up in every single element of life. So you've gone from people being a full-time mum, which is definitely a full-time job, to being a full-time mum and being a full-time employee. And then you've got the full-time looking after the house. And then you've got the full-time trying to have a social life. And then you've got and it doesn't end. You're trying to show up in every capacity in your life at 100%. And I think that men are better at compartmentalizing than women. I think we hold a lot of our emotions in, and those emotions stack one after the other after the other. And we don't expect that our emotional pain is showing up in our physical body, but it is. we think that we can handle everything and we don't need to share how we're feeling. And yet everybody can see how we're feeling because it's showing up in our physical symptoms. And that's my opinion on why that is the way it is. I mean, I don't know how that aligns with what you think.
I totally agree. Again, let's go back to Africa. What I noticed in Africa is that the women, for example, stick together.
Yeah.
There's strength. If there's rice that's needed, you don't just go to the supermarket. You get that rice, you pound it with these great big poles, and you're singing songs.
Yeah.
If the child is ill, the matriarch will come in and she will show you what herbs to have. There's a community. I even go so far as to say, why is it that if you go into an office, for example, and there's a dominant female in there, your menstruation cycle, we know, will actually change the dominant female. Now, I have a theory on this, and it goes back to what we're talking about now, which is if you got big old dinosaur coming along and he needs to eat something, he's going to smell blood. If one female is menstruating, she's valuable, she's going to be vulnerable, basically. So all the other women are going to push her out the way because they're going to say, here you go, Mr. Dinosaur. But if you all menstruate at the same time, guess what? There's this strength in numbers. And I think with fibro, there's strength in numbers, but we've lost that. I think that women have always said, I want to be valued. If I'm going to be a mum and I'm going to be looking after kids and I'm going to be at home, I want that to be as valuable as a man going out to work. And I think somewhere in there, there's a message that's got lost, which is in order for me to be valuable, I've got to go to work.
Yeah,
but
100%.
now I've also got to look after the kids. Now I've got to show up to be the good wife. Now I've got to show up to be the good mother.
Yeah.
And I can't have feelings. I can't have emotions. And I totally agree. I think it's this massive, massive buildup. And I do think that men are kind of more that kind of, we're programmed in a way to be the warrior, the protector.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing this within men as well. Men are lost as well. I mean, the only hunting that most men do is go to the supermarket and get a bit of wrapped up meat, right?
Yeah. But I think we are losing our powerful masculine and our powerful feminine parts. And I think that it's becoming more merged, isn't it? And I think it's okay to be a powerful masculine. I think it's okay to be a powerful feminine. And I think it's okay to embrace those parts of you as well. And I think the problem that we're having at the moment is society as a whole is quite confused about those roles. Because I had a lady say to me the other day, I'm actually really embarrassed to tell people that I look after the kids and I stay at home and my husband goes to work. And I was just, it's wild to me. How have we got to a society where we don't value looking after our children, and we would prefer that you go and pay somebody else to look after your children while you go out to work, probably not earning a lot more than if you had stayed at home because you've got to pay for all this childcare. It doesn't make sense. Something is wrong along the way. Where have we got to with our society when somebody has a big trauma and then you see them back at work the next day and everyone goes, oh, they're doing so well. They're back at work. And so it could be somebody's died. And we're congratulating people because they've got back on with their lives. When did this become acceptable? It doesn't make sense to me. It's broken. And we need to go back to something that's more wholesome, because we can't handle everything. We're not designed to handle everything. That's why we work in a community. That's why we live in a society, because else we'd all just be off on our own, wouldn't we? Just living our own little lives. And that's not the way humans were ever designed.
No, I agree. I have 3 children from previous before my wife, and my wife and I have always said if we'd had a child, she would have wanted to home educate because she was home educated, and she'd want to stay at home. And my wife is a super smart woman, right? But she doesn't look at it as going backwards. She looks at it investing in the future. Because look at the men, the way that men treat women, or even women treat men, is because we don't have that. These kids are coming home, latch door kids. They don't have the mum there. They don't have the dad. Their dad gets home late at night, doesn't see the kids. Mum doesn't see the kids, and it's the same thing. And our children are being farmed out to people who may be giving them values that we wouldn't want to give them.
Yeah, and I think the reality is people are doing their best. I don't think anybody's trying to live a life that isn't them working hard to just try and do their best. But we just don't seem to have what values are we following? Do you know what I mean? As a society, we need to all be working towards the same kind of ethos and values and I think that's been lost along the way. I don't necessarily think it's as an individual level, because I think everybody is trying to show up the best they can for themselves and their kids and their family and work and all the rest of it. But I just think that we perhaps don't, we've lost knowing how to do that in a better way.
I think so. I've noticed that a lot of patients come to me and they're sitting and talking, and suddenly they just break down and cry.
Yeah.
It's almost like my practice becomes a sort of like the old confessional booth in the Catholic Church. But they're carrying so much.
Yeah.
But the first thing that women especially do when they cry is they apologize.
I know, we're the worst for it.
And it's like, why are you apologizing for showing an emotion? It's like this pressure cooker's building. We know that tears are released, as hormones get released and endorphins get released. It's a good thing to do. And I made it a point of, with my children, I've got 3 girls, is to always never suppress that emotion. If they've got something to say, is never to suppress that. So that must have been fascinating for you, because you've had fibromyalgia. Well, you've got fibromyalgia, but you look, all intents and purposes like you don't have it. And what was the reaction from friends and family around you?
So people couldn't believe the change. People couldn't get over the fact that it had been such a short amount of time, and I'd gone from being so sick, because when I was really poorly, people often describe fibro as the invisible illness, don't they? And I didn't think that I looked poorly. It's not until I compare the pictures of me, if I take a picture now and then I compare it to what I looked like then, I can see such a massive difference. And I've put so many of those then and now kind of pictures on my social media for people to look at. And people were just amazed. And for me, this healing journey started 20 months ago. It's been 16, 17 months now since I've taken any medication for my fibro. And that was around the time where I was convinced that I didn't have fibro anymore, because, well, why did I need to take these medications? Because I'm fixed. This is awesome. And then for about 12 months, everybody around me was going, you've got to tell people what you've been doing, because there's been such a significant change. And I was never really somebody that wanted to put myself out there. I was always really worried about other people's judgment. I think that stemmed from being so sick, because my brain was so hypervigilant and I was so anxious about everything. I wouldn't even comment in a group chat, because I was so worried that what I was going to say would be taken wrong, or I would have misinterpreted something. So I didn't even post on my own Facebook, let alone do anything to tell anybody my story. And the longer it went on, the more people would say this. And I was out for a run one day, because in my journey, I decided I wanted to be able to run. I was the woman that couldn't walk, and I did the NHS couch to 3K, and it took me way longer than they had anticipated, because week 1 I couldn't even get through the whole of the thing. But I did it, and last summer I ran half a marathon.
Wow!
Because I wanted to prove I could. And I think there's a lot of empowerment in those kind of challenges. So I was out for a run, and I took a video of myself running, and I thought, well, I wonder if I share this, there might just be a few people out there that would be interested in seeing that it is possible to make a difference and it is possible to change. And honestly, I cannot believe how overwhelming that response has been. It's been crazy.
Yeah, you've got great followers too, and I follow you. I look at your content on TikTok and that's really important. I'm really passionate about my podcast never really kind of being about me, about whoever I interview. So how can people reach out to you and get hold of you? What's the best way? Do you work one-to-one, or is it Zoom? How do you do it?
So you can follow my journey on TikTok. I've got my TikTok account at healing_fibromyalgia. On the TikTok profile, there is a link to my store, and also on the website healingfibro.co.uk. You can either book one-to-one online coaching, or I've made a video tutorial course of all the things that I've done in my journey. And it is really a step-by-step. So I wanted to create a resource, because when I started my TikTok account, I wasn't expecting so many people to want to talk to me. And it's become really overwhelming, and I can't answer everybody's messages, and I can't help everybody in the depth that I would like to be able to help them. So I wanted to create a resource that people could go and learn about the things that I would be telling them, and then afterwards we can then catch up, and then if we want to do some more work afterwards we can. So it is a step-by-step video tutorial of the things that I've done, and I've set it out over 6 weeks so that somebody can go and watch a video. I take myself back to when I was really sick. I couldn't have probably even watched one of these videos in one go. So I wanted to be able to make it easy access. You can watch a little bit, you can go back, or you can watch it all in one go. There's a workbook attached where you can go and spend a week integrating some of these ideas into your day-to-day life, and then you can move on to the next bit. And I think it's about creating the tools for people to start taking empowerment over their journey. And one of the weeks is all about empowerment. And there's too many people thinking you can just take a handful of pills. There's too many people thinking if you change your diet, that's going to do it. And I think we've got to accept that fibromyalgia is more complex than that. And there is a physical element to this without a shadow of a doubt, but there is also an emotional well-being element to this. And a lot of people are affected by trauma. A lot of people are affected by toxic relationships. A lot of people are affected by their own self-esteem and their self-worth. And we need to start thinking about these things. But these things will only work to the extent that you want to implement them and you want to take ownership. Because I always say it's kind of like you've got to look yourself in the mirror and be really honest with yourself, because that's the only way that we really start, is to take accountability.
I think so. I think you have to. I struggle again with in terms of the NHS, that somebody might be, say, type 2 diabetes or heading that way, and yet they're sticking all this sugar into the mouth and processed foods into the mouth. And at some point, it's a bit like there's a big debate right now on these injections for weight loss. All I see really is we've got obesity, and what we're saying is we're going to inject you with these things. You're going to lose loads of weight, but you're going to carry on having the processed food. It does not make sense to me. In no shape, form, or any way does it make any sense to me, So I'm really pleased that there are people like you out there. And same with you. My daughter was the one said to go on TikTok. I thought I was going to get 10 people, 20 people. 20 people. I think what am I now? 117,000 I'm up to now. But awesome. But I'm really keen. I think at some point you and I definitely need to talk. And Lana, let's get together and maybe talk about running a conference.
Yeah, awesome.
I think it'd be. Whereabouts in the country are you based?
West Midlands.
Oh, great. That's fine. Well, she's Birmingham, so.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And I'm Sussex. I'll be traveling them. I'll be traveling the furthest distance. So great. Okay, great. So can you just quickly go through those contacts again? I just want to make sure that it's really not missed, because I do want people to reach out for you.
Yeah. So my TikTok account is healing_fibromyalgia, and the website is healingfibro.co.uk.
Great. Good. Okay, so awesome. we have a tradition on here, as you know, and I hope you've remembered this. We ask everybody before they go to give us their favorite quote and why.
Yeah, so I wrote mine down. Bear with me a second, because okay. I don't ever want to get things wrong. And I also know that people are really keen to make sure that we're sharing good information. So bear with me.
Okay.
This quote, for me, is incredibly powerful, and it kind of sums up the journey attached with healing fibromyalgia. It's a quote by Martin Luther King Jr., and it says, "Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase." And it gives me goosebumps thinking about it, because that's the reality. It's massively overwhelming in your fibromyalgia journey. You feel like you can't see the wood for the trees every so often. And it's why I created a step-by-step program, so that people can do one thing after another, after another, after another. We don't need to try and do everything at once. You've got an overwhelmed brain. Do not make it more overwhelmed. You're going to make yourself feel worse. But literally, it is the first step. And if you just keep taking these first steps, eventually you'll get to the top of that staircase and you won't even realize that you've traveled so far.
And sometimes the staircase goes down, and sometimes it comes back up, but ultimately it's going to go up, right? Because stairs are designed to go up and down. And I think that one of the things that I love about what you've said is that, be gentle to yourself.
Yeah.
It is a journey.
Yeah.
You know, I always say that, you know, the journey to enlightenment can be an airplane or a bicycle. We're both going to get there, right? Sometimes it's just going to take a little bit longer, you know, so we just get like that. Cool. Okay. Listen, it's great to have you on.
Been amazing. Thank you.
We're gonna obviously be scheduling to get this out probably August, I think, sometime around that, because I have so many guests on. I've got people left, right, and center coming at me. But we definitely we'll keep in contact. I'll let you know when this goes out. So but
Awesome.
thank you. Really, really appreciate it. Take care. Bye.
No, thank
bye.
you.
Bye.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.